Guess what, students? This is your last TCA video lesson. Woohoo! You've made it to graduation. I'm very proud of all of you. Well, the last thing we're going to look at this year is using the quadratic formula. And if you look in the red box, you see the quadratic formula. It looks kind of nasty, but it's not too bad. It is a formula that is helpful to memorize. If you ever do need to do that in college, there's a little song that can help with that. It goes like this. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Yep, it's the tune to Pop Goes the Weasel. Anyway, let's look at how to use it. There's a number of steps here. I'm going to do 2 examples for you and then ask you to do 2 problems yourself. The first step is to set the equation equal to 0. As you look at number 1, we see it equals 12. Not 0. So I just rewrote the entire equation, 10a squared minus 4a plus 15 equals 12, subtracted the 12 from both sides. So now it equals 0. This is now the equation that we will be using. The next step is to identify a, b, and c and plug them into the formula. A is the coefficient of a squared. In this case, it's 10. B is the coefficient of a. In this case, it is a negative 4. Always include the sign before the coefficient. It's a part of it. And C is a positive 3. It is the constant, the one with no variable. So I just put those numbers in for A, B, and C in the formula. X is equal to negative B. Well, negative means the opposite of B. B was a negative 4. So we change that to a positive 4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so I have negative 4 squared, minus 4 times a times c. 4 times 10 times 3, all over 2a, 2 times 10. Just plug in the numbers. Step 3 is to simplify the radical. So I'm going to take the entire radical expression, everything under the square root, and simplify that. You can put it all into your calculator if you want. That's fine. Just be sure to be careful about using the parentheses. Negative 4 squared is a positive 16. When you do 4 times 10 times 3, that's a 120. Subtracting 16 minus 20 gives us a negative 104. So I've got the square root of negative 104 that I need to simplify. Remember to break it down. Negative 1 times positive 104. Notice that negative 1 is going to be an I in your simplified radical. The 104 broke down to 2 times 52. The 52 broke down to 2 times 26. And the 26 broke down to 2 times 13. Notice I have a pair of 2's. So that pair of 2's is going to be 1, 2 outside of the radical when it's simplified. And I also have 2 times 13 left. Both of those have no partner, nothing that's exactly like it. So the 2 times 13 I left inside the radical and multiplied them to get 26. Therefore, my simplified radical is 2i square root of 26. Now I'm going to rewrite the formula with that simplified radical. Remember, it started out with 4 plus or minus, and then it had that long radical expression. So I'm going to go 4 plus or minus, but instead of that long radical expression, I'm going to put the 2i square root of 26. It was all over 2a, all over 2 times 10, so it went all over 20. The next step is to simplify the fraction. Notice the 3 numbers in the 3 terms. I have a 4, a 2, and a 20. I cannot include the square root of the 26 when I'm simplifying. Just kind of ignore that when you're deciding on how to simplify. Since it's under the radical, it cannot simplify with the other numbers. Is there a number that goes into all 3 of those? Yes. 2 goes into 4 and into 2 and into 20. So I'm going to divide all of them by 2. 4 divided by 2 gives me 2. Right here. 2 divided by 2 gives me 1. So I just have 1i left with the square root of 26. And 20 divided by 2 gives me 10 right here. So you can leave your answer in this form, or that plus or minus means I'm adding or subtracting. You could write those as two different expressions. X equals 2 plus I square root of 26 over 10, or x equals 2 minus I square root of 26 over 10. That is an alternative way to write your two answers. I'm fine with either way. The one in the circle with the plus or minus sign is fine, or you can separate them out into the two fractions. I also want to do number 3 as an example. So step 1, I set the equation equal to 0, took that whole equation, subtracted the 4 from both sides, which gave me my new equation to work with. 3x squared plus 8x minus 35 equals 0. It's very, very essential to have it equal 0 before you start plugging numbers into the quadratic formula. So now I'm going to identify a, b, and c and plug them into the formula. A is 3 because it's the coefficient of x squared. B is a positive 8 because it's the coefficient of the x. And C is a negative 35, the constant, the one that is not with a variable. I then plugged those numbers into the formula. X equals negative b. B was a positive 8, so I changed the sign and made it a negative 8. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, that would be 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which was 3, times c, which was negative 35, all over 2a, 2 times 3. Step 3 is to simplify the radical. So we're going to take that whole radical expression and simplify it. So I took the 8 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 35. I plugged that into my calculator, remembering to include the parentheses, and got 484. Simplifying that radical, I broke it down to 4 times 121. But 4 is 2 times 2. And 121 is a perfect square also, 11 times 11. So the two 2's came out of the radical as 1, 2, and the two 11's came out of the radical as 1, 11. I don't have anything left because everything broke down to a perfect square. 2 times 11 is 22. So all of that is just 22. I no longer have a radical. Now I'm going to rewrite it with the simplified radical. X is equal to negative 8 plus or minus. Then I have that long radical expression. Now that's just a 22. All over 2 times a, which was 2 times 3, which equals 6. Notice when you don't have a square root anymore, you can really simplify this. So I'm going to rewrite both of those as two different expressions, two different fractions. In the first fraction, I'm going to use the plus. And in the second fraction, I'm going to use the minus. Negative 8 plus 22 is 14, right here, divided by 6. And then as I go down, I realize I can divide both the 14 and the 6 by 2 and get 7 over 3. With the minus sign, I have negative 8 minus 22, which is negative 30. And negative 30 divided by 6 is just negative 5. So my two answers are 7/3 or negative 5. So you try number 2 and 4 and turn it in. And this concludes our last video lesson.